I never once thought of checking whether or not somebody had a real or fake ID based on whether or not they knew the zodiac sun sign associated with the date on that ID. That is such a clever thing and just an interesting part in the story we're going to hear today from our community member, Gia Nescio. We know that you were born magical. We know that you are intuitive, and we know that you are brimming with everyday enchantment. Here at the Sisters Enchanted, we believe in intention, we believe in intuition, and we believe in everyday magic. Welcome in to the Expedition to Soul podcast. Hello, Gia.
Hello.
Welcome
Hello.
to
I'm
the
so happy to
podcast.
be here.
I'm so happy to
Yes.
have you. Gia's a community member here at the Sisters Enchanted, holistic witchery tarot coach. Gia knows her stuff, is a professional in people and how people work and knowing people and helping people, and has a brand new podcast called Wake Up Witch. And Gia's joining us today to tell us some of her story. And also, I bet it will inspire you to wake the heck up if you don't feel very awake right now. Gia,
Yeah.
why don't you give a little introduction? Who are you? What do we need to know?
Well, so good morning, everybody. I think what you need to know is that I'm from Philadelphia. That's a huge part of who I am and my story. I am a awakened witch, but by family. So I basically put the witch to sleep. I was my grandmother was a witch. One of my mom knows something, and she was the one that told me to put it down, put it away for a while. Um, I made a conscious decision to do so when I went to college. Otherwise, I was worried that I wouldn't make any friends and people would think I was strange, particularly because I have traveled the world. So I lived abroad. I moved there. Lived in England when I was 18. I went to boarding schools. So it's fun when people talk about witches and Harry Potter and stuff like that. I think, yeah, yeah, I was at a house, all of that. So I think there's so much, but I really want people to, I love the fact that there's this new energy that's happening, that people are waking up and people are interested in the spirituality of witchery, or the word witch, I think is such a historically, right, laced with all kinds of negative for many people. Uh, I think the other interesting part about that is that there's lots of secrets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So secrets are fascinating. And my family has lots of secrets, right? And a lot of times, sometimes people, when they meet me, they'll say, like if I'm out and about, or a gentleman would like to talk to me, one of the questions they'll be is like, "So what are you?" I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "So where are you from?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm from Philly." And they're like, "No, like, but where are you?" I'm like, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "America." And then it's like, "No, but like you look like you're not, like you look like black, but you could be something else. Like, are you Latino? Are you Dominican? Are you?" And then I just have to say, well, there's a long history of people in America, in the world, that had relationships that were not out in the open, but they had children. And so many of my family members, before it was legal to do so, were in long-term relationships with people that were of a different race. And when you mix all of that up, and you make a special brew, you get me. So I think that's a good introduction.
Well, I love how you shared about these family secrets. And then also some of what I know you're going to share about is sort of putting to sleep this witch part of yourself that was generational in your family, and then waking up to it again. And I know we're going to hear more about that story. And I think that something that anybody can relate to here is this idea of hiding who the generations before us who hid who they were, which then taught us to be a certain way so as to not appear as if we're hiding something because
Yeah.
it wasn't okay to be who you are. And I love that you shared that. This summer, I went on a little journey with my grandmother and my mother to where my mom was raised as a kid, and my grandmother moved when she was like a preteen. And so many hidden stories of, like, in our family, it was, like poverty and suicide and alcoholism and just, but it's always like, oh no, well, he was just a sad person, and just keep
Hmm.
not. And you look around as a person who is awake to energy and people and stories, and you're like, all of a sudden, everything here makes sense.
Yes.
So I love this, that wherever you are, whoever's listening to this, remember that the people who came before us, whatever, like, there was a lot to be hidden to protect themselves in society. And we carry those stories often unknowingly and sometimes knowingly within us. And it impacts how we look at ourselves in this world and how we're willing to put ourselves out there, and whether or not we've seen that fear and acknowledged it. So thank you
Mm.
for sharing that story.
Oh, absolutely. So, I am a trained psychotherapist. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology. That's what I worked as professionally. And I think about Jung, who is now like my favorite of all the psychologists of all time, because he talks about this hidden self, right?
Mm-hmm.
The subconscious self that you're hiding. And when we talk about shadow work, that's really a very Jungian thing, is this
Yeah.
idea of there's all this stuff that you're hiding and needs to get out. Um, and I was just thinking about how my grandmother too, like, so we try to find ways to express the real you in other ways, right? So are you into history? Are you into healing? Are you into helping? But you can't do it the way that you really want to and you could. So how can I work with people and know sometimes that they're going through something or they need help to talk about something that they can't say out loud? uh, oh, I know, I can be a therapist. And then they can come into my office and they can be in a safe space where they can say their truth, right? And I might already know it,
Yeah.
but, and what's interesting is sometimes a client will be like, you already know, don't you? And I'll be like, well, you tell me what I know, right? You tell me again. Let's just be sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like wordplay to get to the place of letting people feel free to get out, to say what needs to be said, to get to this place of healing. So that kind of work, I love, right? And I love that now there is a change of time, society, feminism that is allowing women to come out into uh, out of the shadows, if it were,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not worried that they're going to be burnt alive or killed,
Yeah.
or in the instance of, so my family, the story is all of the women over generations were very beautiful. And of course, there's slavery. And then also, uh, what is it when they separated people? But it wasn't slavery, but um, they would separate people, right? That was still a law,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Jim Crow. And so, but they were like, but like, how would she so fly? Like, I still like her, or I'd like to have her anyway. I like to have this relationship anyway. And so, and sometimes it was not a good thing, right? Sometimes it was rape, but in my family, it was a lot of secret marriages.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd be out in the country or even in the city, but they'd be living in a live and live let live part of the city,
Yeah.
right, where nobody ever asked any questions, so that they could have their life. My favorite story is my grandmother's story of her marriage. So she married my grandmother was very fair skinned, but she considered herself black. And that time was one drop rule. And she married a full on white man,
Mm-hmm.
and they were really much, very much in love. And but it was illegal for them to get married where they lived in Virginia. And so they decided that they would go to New York to get married where it was legal. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that but my grandma was alive. How is this? This is so crazy. Like I remember
Yeah.
my grandmom's. This is not like thousands of years ago, right? Um, and they would go to New York and their party that they could celebrate, the place they could celebrate at, and why I love ice cream to this day was they went to ice cream to go get ice cream in New York City. And that was the thing to do that at that time. But it was like their only place that they could celebrate in the open that they just got married. And then they moved back into Philadelphia and they lived in secret right outside Philly in Pennsylvania, um, being married and but just never talked about it.
Yeah.
And I thought, what? But this was like, you know, gosh, like the 40s, the 30s or 40s, that this was still like
I know. I
not
think
okay in certain places.
people just don't, these stories of those who came before us, I really think that somehow in our heads, and maybe it's just the reality of life where we see our lives, right? Like we see our existence. By and large, we don't walk around thinking that like something bad's going to happen to us tomorrow and this is it. And we just kind of see our linear timeline. And we don't realize that this story was not long ago. Like it was
Yeah,
practically yesterday in the timeline of the world. And, you know, in all different like my grandmother, she's how old is it? My grandma's 85. And when she was pregnant with her second, because of just societal standards, like she was prescribed by her doctor diet pills to like keep her smaller. And then her daughter, was okay at birth. And then now later, though, had seizures and anxiety. And they were like, then they find the research could be tied to, and she never
right.
forgave herself for that. But it's
Oh,
these, but well, these like, so just these things that we think people don't do that. Who would ever do that? Like, hello, it was basically yesterday that this was happening.
right.
And right now, someone actually in our Sisters Enchanted community, her daughter is gay and was moving to Georgia, and they got married in Colorado before they moved because they knew they couldn't get married after they moved. And I think that we disassociate from uncomfortable histories thinking like,
Yeah.
well, that was then, but like, no, what it made me know it wasn't that. And
Yeah,
those
yeah.
stories, they walk right alongside us today in all different ways. And they really make us who we are. And
Oh, absolutely. So I ended up marrying a white guy who lived in South Philly, which was the other side of town from the side of town that I was living in. And he and I got married, like just no problem, right? No
yeah,
problems. But then with my son, he is autistic. But before we knew he was autistic, my pregnancy was fine, but the doctors had to do special blood work and things like that. And they really had to do a lot of work because my husband is half Italian, and his mom was Hawaiian.
oh,
So the doctors were like, okay, so we have a child who is black and white and Asian, like Pacific Islander, and like what?
yeah,
Okay, so we're gonna give you all the tests. And I thought, okay, but he said that when I was getting the test done, he was like, oh my gosh, so much blood. And then it took a really long time for them to get the information back. So I feel like a lot of the work that we're doing in witchery now and bringing people back and waking people up is it's taking a lot of time
yeah,
to get the information back, to discover who you are, who you always were. All
mhm,
of these stories, all of the metaphors, all of the ideas of the shadow work, of the hidden self, all of this information has been here forever. We've just been doing a lot of work. Some people for, if you're me, for 20 years, for other people for 5 years, who knows? But you're doing work built all of this stuff around you. And now you're like, oh my gosh, I'm awake. Where am I? What is this about? Who am I? And what do I do now? Because I can't go back.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of us feel like I don't want to go back to this idea of hiding, of hiding
Mm-hmm.
myself. I'm exhausted. I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but it was exhausting for me to hide what I thought, or writing it right, or um writing it a certain way, wording it a certain way, trying to do kind of uh like, I don't know, wrapping a lot of stuff in spells and
Well,
in word spells to
and to
get.
keep everybody else comfortable.
Yes,
To
right.
keep everybody else comfortable is what it
Yeah,
is.
to keep everyone else comfortable and me but I was just so tired. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't it be great if I could meet? And when I just joined holistic witchery, I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to meet people? Maybe there are people like me too in the world. And so what I love is finally meeting, like you, Sarah, and everyone in the Sisters Enchanted, people that are on the same path. I always say I'm finally meeting my tribe, and it's fantastic. And we can talk about everything or
Yeah.
nothing,
Yeah.
whatever you want.
I love I love hearing these thank you for sharing your stories, your family stories, your story. And that there is this, what we do in life, which is help. You became a psychotherapist, right? I was a teacher. We do these things and we want to help people. We want to, and whatever you do, I mean, you can, a person listening to this, if you are a stay-at-home parent, or you are maybe you work retail, or you're a bartender and and you have a bartending story, or a bouncer bartending situation, I want you to share with people because it's a good story. But like, whatever you're doing, you do it for a reason. Either it's because you just need a job, but you like this work, like it fits for you, it's the kind of thing you like to do, or you do it because it's meaningful. And so much, though, I think, of what we do, if we don't ask the questions, and you said, let's just be sure, when you were saying that your clients know that you already know, what's up with them, and you say, but you tell me, let's just be sure. And I think that everybody needs that let's just be sure check in, because we are so, again, just like linear in what we see in front of us, and we're not looking at these, wait a second, what created me to think this is what I was sure about, and let's just be sure
Yeah.
that this is actually what I want to be doing for me. This is actually what I want to be saying, and the words I want to be using, and the feelings I want to be feeling, and the people I want to be connecting with. Because your ancestors past, and your past history, the pieces of us that, again, like these shadow things that we feel like we don't want to talk about because they make other people uncomfortable, or they just feel so not related to me and the life that I see right now. But really, to wake up, and wake up witch, as your podcast name is, to claim or use that word witch when we look at people who were called witches and executed, persecuted. They're just people that were different, living their life. And I think to choose the word witch really is to say, like, I will be authentic, and I stand with people in their, whoever they are. It's okay to be you. You are born worthy and whole. And this like otherness, we're like standing with the other when we use that word, which I think really holds so much power. Um, but I don't
I
know if you
love
want to
standing
add
with
to
the
that.
other.
What was that?
I love standing with the other. I think
Yeah.
that's why I loved being a bartender.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell
Before
the
I was
story.
before I became a therapist, which that's how I paid for graduate school and stuff like that, was bartending. But I love being a bartender because you got to meet everyone. whoever, and they would come and be like whoever you were, and you get to hear their troubles, their celebrations, their joys, their sadness, and you could just talk to them, and they would open up to you, and all you had to do was hand them a little special brew of their choice, right?
Yeah.
Really,
You're
like I always think it's
a
like
bartender
the
witch.
yeah, no, really, it feels like a special potion when you are making someone a cocktail, or you're getting them a beer or a craft brew, or it says a lot about that, what they choose. And do you want it straight up? Do you want it on the rocks? Do you have do you get the same thing every time, or do you want something totally different?
Yeah.
Are you adventurous? Um, and sometimes people come and say, surprise me. I love it when people walk in, surprise me. Okay.
I feel like that's a really good time to tap into your intuition as a witch and like get the whole feel and the vibe and like what do they need right now?
Yeah. What do you need? Do you need a little bit? Do you need a lot? Are we talking a scotch of the rocks, or that kind of guy or lady?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think people often are surprised when I will get a Guinness,
Yeah.
which is my favorite. It's my favorite beer. It's like my
It's
go-to.
mine
It's the
too,
least.
Gia.
What? Yes. Because it's, you know what? It's the least amount. It's very low percentage of alcohol.
It is. And it has protein in it, hidden
And it has
protein.
protein.
Hmm.
And back in the day, they used to use it to help people, like women, breastfeed.
Yep.
Um, I love it. So but I also, like, and the other thing is, it's like slow. It's a slow drink,
It is.
right? It takes the process of just getting it and then drinking it is slow. And I don't want to go fast anymore.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
I just, and obviously, I mean, I lived in England, was probably my favorite country besides the US. That place felt like, oh, this is just like Philly East. Like it just felt very much, it did. It felt like Philadelphia with people with different accents.
Yeah.
I was like,
I could
okay.
see that. I mean, I've never been to England or like, but I could see from what I know that
Well,
connection.
yeah, the buildings, there's the same kind of architecture. There's
Hmm.
the same kind of, um, I love the fact that people, again, like secrets. There's a lot of things that are unspoken.
Yeah.
So I love that. And I loved being in a boarding school. Sometimes people are like, how was boarding school? Was it horrible? Did your parents not love you? It was like, actually, boarding school was great. It
It was
was a
like
lot of fun.
my secret desire as a kid was for someone to send me to boarding school, like in London.
It totally depends on the school. Every
I
school is
bet.
different.
Yeah.
But basically, I mean, look, I truly believe like I went to Hogwarts. I loved it. And
Yeah.
everybody was fantastic. And also when I went to school in England, because I went to school in America and boarding school in America and boarding school in England,
Hmm.
each of which were great, were
Yeah.
fantastic. And I love how, but it's so interesting to me too, how like even like the Hogwarts and the Harry Potter world, like some people are very like, oh, well, I don't know. Like that's just, they get very upset if you take it a little too seriously,
Yeah. 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 For sure.
right? It's like, what magic? And that's like the devil's work and
Yeah.
things
No,
like that.
we've gotten some wild emails over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for
Interesting
sure.
folks.
Like, as opposed to, if you're someone like me who grew up Catholic, and you're in a witchery class with you, and you'll talk about like incense
Yeah.
or blowing spark. I'm like, oh yeah, we do that every Sunday.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I remember, I think it was you actually in a class we were talking, we used the word altar. And then
Yeah,
I think you pointed out like that word is just like, and you mentioned this earlier, like the words we choose,
yeah.
and how words can mean so many layered things to us. And something like the word altar for sure is one of those words.
Oh yeah. So it's hard for me to use the word altar, because for me, an altar is like, okay, I'm coming, I'm sitting down, I'm kneeling. There's a
Yeah.
whole process. I also need another space for my home that's like more of a meditation
Yeah.
room, and more of a space that's not directly linked to the specific religion or practice, right?
Yeah.
So, but I feel like that's different for everyone. I think it's important for you to find a place, a space that you can have for your spiritual work,
Yeah.
whatever they may be.
Hmm.
And it's hard to do sometimes. Like right now, when we're in this having this conversation, and like downstairs, the landlord is talking about the contractors and stuff like that, right? So finding a place where you can get as close to peaceful and calm as possible so that you can really connect with whatever your higher power may be
Yeah.
or your true self if you don't believe in a higher power, because that's possible. Some people don't believe in that. Um, and using whatever you need to help guide you. I mean, the reason I love tarot cards, I love cards. I love them so much. Oh, I could just talk to you. We could talk more and more about, we don't have enough time, but I could talk to you so much about the imagery and the history
Yeah.
of tarot cards and that connecting, because we're talking about history a lot of like, for me, it was like, oh, like this is a way to kind of connect all these stories, right? There's a story in me and there's a story in you, and we just got to figure out where we are in the story today,
Yeah.
and a little bit in the past and a little bit in the future, and maybe we want to change it. Maybe you
Hmm.
want to change the story. It's not static. But I love all of that narrative work, and I think it just helps us grow as
100%.
um and find ourselves and find, and for me, I'm a big fan of peace. For me, I think peace is what I've been looking for. And it comes and it goes, right? Like nobody's always just like,
Yeah.
otherwise you're like on a hill somewhere,
Yeah.
like
Blissed
peaceful all
out.
the
Yeah.
time. But most of us have not reached that stage of enlightenment.
Yeah.
So I just like the idea of trying to find peace for yourself, for your family, um, and like whatever you're going to do moving forward, and taking all those tools and using it in your life. For me, I love that I found these tools and I'm using them, right? That's why I feel awake. Like, oh, instead of just freaking out or drinking a little, like one bottle too many of wine, which by the way, if you're a bartender, a bottle of wine is like, all right, I had a couple glasses. Um, if you have more than one, you should probably stop. Don't do that.
Reassess.
But right, reassess or call yourself a sommelier, which is what I'm just a sommelier. I'm just an expert. Um, but like I feel like that for me, those were things that like you can use it and it really is amazing and wonderful, or you could go too far, right? So with
Yeah.
everything that you do, I feel like it's about finding that place of peace and using those tools. Even with tarot, it's like I can't ask the same question
Yeah.
5 times a day to get a different answer. I
And
call that
yeah,
tarot abuse.
till you find the answer that you were looking for.
That you want, right? Like it's like, okay, no,
Yeah.
right?
This
So I
is
feel
this
like,
is no longer growth and intuition. This is fishing.
yeah,
It
yeah.
becomes fishing.
And so you fish, like some people fish with drinks, with with work.
Yeah.
For me, work and school, oh my gosh, because I've had a million tons of school and education. Like I feel people that like education and like being educated, like you can get trapped in like class and not
Yes.
do the work. And so I feel like for me, I'm ready to do the work to take what this piece of psychotherapy and all of that education piece and the witchy piece of myself, and I'm ready to like go out and do the work all the time. I'm
Yeah.
excited and talk to other people about doing the work
Yeah.
so they can do it themselves. And I'll be like, well, now let me talk. Tell me what you think.
It's such an interesting thing. And I feel like because we have to wrap up this conversation, but I feel like there's a total like part two down the road in the future because we just had an intake for our holistic witchery class. And one of the big things people were talking about was like learning the witch stuff, like the practice of being a witch separate from the inner work. And I feel like I mean, you like there's nothing you're not going to like do worldly harm by doing that. But also it so quickly becomes a let me memorize all these herb associations, let me memorize all these tarot cards. And then I'm kind of like, okay, well, that's fun. I mean, that can be, but isn't the point to grow and change and like raise consciousness and like create consciously? Isn't that all the and wake up
Yeah,
and live, right? And that
right.
requires that inner work at the same time. Um, like they
No, I
just
totally
go
agree. I don't
together.
think I hear often like, what's the right way to do this?
Yeah.
What's the right meaning of this?
Unfortunately, my internet went out completely and I lost Gia as we were about to round the corner on the end of our podcast recording. But I wanted to share some things with you that she shared with me. One about how people in her family have always studied astrology, and was one of the things they asked her when she was dating her now husband, and how she would ask people when she was a bartender what their zodiac sign was to verify whether or not it was actually their ID she was checking. So many fun little bits like that in Gia's history. And I loved that she shared about these pieces of her history, including this astrology bit that her family sort of would make a secret and hide away. And it wasn't until she woke up to that and embraced it again in her life. She joined us in Holistic Witchery and brought this back together, where she saw another path forward with herself, combining what she was doing in her daily life as a psychotherapist and combining in tarot cards and all of these practices to move in a slightly newer direction and wake up to who it is that she wanted to be. So thank you, Gia, for being on the podcast. I'm sorry I lost you. We weren't able to jump back on right after. We tried. It just wasn't working out. But you can find Gia and her new podcast, Wake Up Witch. So be sure to search that out. Gia's podcast is Wake Up Witch, and she's in our community. So if you're in a Holistic Witchery, come say hi to her because she is in there. Thank you all for hanging out and listening to this conversation with Gia. It was a real delight. I love hearing the stories from people that make us who we are and understanding what brought them to where they are today and how we came to our paths joined at the Sisters Enchanted. All right, y'all, go out there, you wake up and make today a good one. Until next time, I hope that you have an enchanted rest of your day ahead. If you liked this episode of the Expedition to Soul podcast, please rate, review, subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, it will really help us spread everyday magic, intention, and intuition to the masses and helps us so much as a small business. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. And as always, thank you so much for listening and being part of the community here at the Sisters Enchanted. And we'll see you in the next episode.